Well, this was a thing that happened. For those of you who are watching this in the future, recently a fursuit sold at auction for $50,000, which is record-breaking by a factor of 2 during what we, in the West at least, think is the tail end of a pandemic. This isn't actually particularly interesting by itself. The discourse that flared up around it was, though, and I'm going to talk about some of those subjects in this video. But I want to make clear that as far as I'm concerned, there's only one narrative directly related to the auction that actually matters. The purchase was funded with cryptocurrency. This guy looked at literally fruitlessly destroying part of the biosphere that we rely on to sustain us in order to pay 10 times over the odds for a luxury item and said, yes, that's a good exchange. What a breathtaking asshole. So what does a $50,000 fursuit auction mean? Well, my first answer would be not a lot really. If you look at pretty much any luxury or rare item at the moment, prices have gone significantly out of normal. There are a lot of people who have actually done well out of the pandemic, and a lot of goods have suffered severe supply disruptions, and this has had a predictable effect on prices. Will some makers up their prices? Probably, and then they might go down again. Ultimately, I don't think auction prices are a good representation of the market value of a fursuit commission. They're often subject to very different forces and can gather a lot of hype, speculation, and troll bids. Should you be annoyed about a $50,000 fursuit? No. Except for the whole crypto profligacy thing. Definitely be angry about that because you're stuck in this rock forever too. Let's talk though about hype, social media, fursuit prices, and the nature of the fursuit industry, because I think it's important to take a look at it. And I sometimes see tweets about it that kind of misunderstand how we got to where we are. Fursuits have gotten more expensive, but then the quality and professionalism of fursuit making has also increased, and, like it or not, so has the cost of living, and particularly in 2020 and 2021, the cost of materials. One thing to bear in mind, though, is that when we see discussions of how fursuits have gotten so expensive, we almost always see a debate that barely strays outside the bounds of a tiny selection of popular studios. I get the impression, however, that smaller studios can find it a struggle to attract business, and fear that increasing their prices will result in a drop in already difficult business. This is where that fundamental misunderstanding about the fursuit industry comes in, and I'd like to note that I'm an observer rather than a maker here. The fursuit industry is what you might term a boutique market. It's composed of lots of small operations, usually just a single artist, but sometimes up to half a dozen people working under a founding artist who is associated with the style. Production numbers are limited, a single person can only produce so many fursuits, and a studio can only grow so large before the creativity is lost and output becomes commoditized. We do not want this to happen. We seriously do not. We don't like to think of our fandom in these kinds of ways, but the boutique nature of pretty much all of its artifact production is an intrinsic part of it. Most of us know this, it feels right on a subconscious level, even if we don't understand the theory. The problem is when this boutique market clashes with the way we've been trained to consume. We've been trained to buy Funko Pop generic animal person number 69 from the giant pile of identically produced and packaged items from the faceless Chinese factory. In any other fandom, this would be pretty normal. Most fandoms are canonical, they have an established property that members are fans of. Furry is non-canonical. It is built around member-generated content and individual expression. A fursuit is not a reproducible item. It is a unique work of art. Fursuit making, therefore, does not fit this pattern. There will only ever be so many slots for a given studio, and they cannot offer more without destroying the nature of their art, but we still treat them this way. The big brands in fursuiting get all of the attention, and the rest wither as unlucky punters wait patiently for the next opening. This is where social media comes in, particularly Twitter, since that's where all the furry promotion and networking happens these days. Twitter is like the rings of power in Tolkien's fantasy world. The rings enhance the power of their wielders, making them appear mighty, more lordly, and more unstoppable, and the more powerful a person was, the more magnified the effect. In the hands of a simple hobbit, a ring of power might not make them seem so great, but in the hands of a lord it might make them appear kingly or a king seem numbered amongst the greatest of leaders. This might seem like a weird aside, but this is legitimately how Twitter works. The more popular you are, the more popular Twitter will make you, and so on and so forth. Other social media have similar effects, YouTube for instance. This means a very popular maker with a long-standing and broad audience will find it very easy to advertise their wares, pick up new fans, and broadcast their style to a very wide audience, whereas someone trying to break into the market, who has been doing it a while but hasn't had any popular clients, will struggle, because all of the attention is focused on popularity. In a mass production market, this isn't a huge problem. It's all made in the same factory anyway, and there's plenty to go around. Please, buy more. In a boutique market, this is bad, as boutique studios can only make so much. The hype train can only fit so many cars alongside the platform. A popular maker may have thousands of hopefuls per slot, whereas a less known maker may struggle to fill all of their slots at all. In order for a market like this to work, we should be more flexible with who we request suits from. We should be casting a wider net for makers in the styles we desire. We shouldn't fixate on the popular makers, but we have been trained to do so, and our tools funnel us into it. It's natural then that we should perceive prices increasing if all we see are the big names. Why shouldn't they increase their prices? Are they not worth it? The market will certainly bear those prices come opening time because there are enough people clamoring for a slot. These makers, however, are not the whole market. Far from it. They're just a small, highly visible part of it on which our attention has been disproportionately focused. That's not to say that they don't deserve praise for the quality of their work. We are, after all, talking about the masters of the craft, but we need to look further to understand fursuit making as a whole. So you might ask, where do auctions come into this? Well, there's always going to be auctions. Suits will get completed and not paid for. People will sell second-hand suits. Makers will decide to make something they want and know they'll still get a good price for it. And sometimes makers will want to take a punt and see just how much people are willing to throw at them. Just remember that auctions are not the same as commission slots. They themselves are the subject of hype, of trolling, and of people just getting so caught up in the moment that they simply lose context in what they're doing. The moment an auction becomes a hot topic, all sense of reality will be lost. Remember that. But mostly remember that this dude literally burned a part of the biosphere you need in order to live, just to buy a goddamn fancy carpet for the cost of a down payment on a house.